Welcome everybody, by the way. My job is complete with the welcome slide. Now, if I hit stop share, hopefully things don't break. Hey, can you pull up your
Sure.
slides?
Maybe.
Jillian says hi, everybody. She's back in the lab again. For those of you who don't know, she's a grad student at Duke, and smart kid. So what she's doing working with me is beyond me, but we're happy to have her since this is being recorded now.
And now I'm trying to get rid of the meeting controls again. Oh, there they go. I knew I could do it.
Now, Kay, before I turn things over to you, you do have a couple of poll questions today.
Yes, I do.
Do I have that right?
Yes, you do.
Okay. And are they coming in the first 30 minutes?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Why do I see poll 1 and poll 3?
I don't know. It's after, I can tell you what slides they're after.
Okay. Do you know where the poll questions are? I mean,
do I know? Yeah, I do.
In Zoom, I know you know what they are. I think I can manage this, although it has 3 poll
it's going to come up on the slides.
Okay. I'm only asking because she has 3 poll questions here in one launch. Is that how you want it? Or would you prefer to go into video? Okay. And there's 3 questions. So do you see the poll button on your screen for Zoom?
I hit it.
You hit it.
I don't.
Lon, do you see it on yours? We should make everybody co-hosts there.
Yeah, we should.
I'm glad we're recording this. I'm going to show Jillian how lost I was trying to. Okay, I got poll 1, and maybe I'll get poll question 1. Which of the following is the greatest barrier?
Could be.
Okay, good.
I didn't memorize them.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll do our best as we go down the road here.
We can wing whatever we need to wing.
Absolutely. So far, we're impressing everyone. Everyone impressed? Yes.
We're all friends, so it doesn't matter.
We are all experts here.
Okay, Raymond's here, another admit. So now we'll get things rolling. Welcome, everybody. As you can tell, this is a highly polished program. We have only the top tools for our team and members. But if you're new and you haven't been a part of this, and I know most of you have, this is really your interactive discussion. Kay will guide us today and facilitate, but the more contributions everyone feels comfortable sharing about their clients or their own operations and their experience, the better for everyone. So please feel free to unmute and open video at any point. If you're more comfortable putting your comments or conversation into the chat, that's fine too. I'll help manage that. And Lon, if you don't mind helping on the back end of today, that'd be real helpful.
Yep.
For those of you who don't know, Dr. Kathryn Jackson, Kay is the co-founder of ResponseLearning and iLearnCC.com. Do I have that right?
Yep, you got it.
Great. This part cracked me up, 30 plus years. I'm going, no, hold on. I've known you 30 years. And CCNG's been around almost 35 years. So I would say 30 plus is being modest. We've been around this industry for a long time, working with people
couple of years. Yeah.
On how they learn and how they lead, and developed a company around that, and developed tools around that, and developed clients around that, and have plenty of knowledge to share. So thanks for taking the time to kind of create this silent abandonment conversation that we're going to have today. I'm very interested because it's both sides of the equation. If I have that right, it's customers and employees, right?
Yeah, it is.
Well, I'm going to launch, and hopefully I don't screw up the poll. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This really, let me go to the next slide if it will let me. There we go. This is really one of the things that launched me on this topic is I'll share what the study is that this came out of. But what if 70% of your customers looked like they were in your system, but they were already gone and you didn't know it? And when I heard this statistic from the study, it's like, boy, we are in a brand new world with abandonment, especially, and this comes from the digital realm. So let's get into that. And again, any questions, please ask all the way along. Any comments, would love it to be interactive. So the objectives we're going to go through today is the abandonment game really has changed, and we'll go through why the digital channels and AI. We talk a lot about AI in this community, and so I'll talk a little bit about how AI has changed this and what silent physical abandonment is. And we're going to go through that because of the study. And then also silent emotional abandonment. And this is the journey I've been on probably about the last 8 to 10 weeks. Once I saw the study, the 2025 study I'm going to be referencing, it took me down this entire path of abandonment. And it really is an interesting topic to think about how much we know and how much we don't know and how much we can measure and currently how much we can't measure. And then the cost of it. The cost of silent abandonment is incredible when we start thinking about it. So why has it changed the landscape? Let's talk about the current landscape. We all know the voice channel right now. So we've got IVR and ACD call abandonment, and we've been measuring it for ages. We know how to forecast for it. We know how to report on it. We know how to analyze it. But what's happening now is in the digital channels, we're having to measure silent abandonment, but it just got trickier. And I'm going to go through why that is. And if we've got to learn how to measure it because I'll show you what some of the costs are. And it's really the cost of not knowing that there is someone in the digital channel and we think we're going to serve them, but we can't serve them. And I'll go through why that is. And excuse me, I keep getting that little taskbar that if you see me changing something, I'm hiding that. So the digital channel, and then the other thing that happened is the voice channels. AI is now shining a light on how customers and our employees disconnect emotionally while they're still connected. And we're going to go through that and the cost of that. So what do we mean by the digital abandonment? And this is really, let's take the path of a customer coming through the chat channel. So the customer comes in, they may or may not be documenting what they're doing. All of you have probably been in chat. Some of the chats allow you to put in what's your name, what's your issue that you're coming in on. And then they exit. And what's bolded here is the critical part of silent abandonment in a chat. So they exit the chat, but they don't close the chat window. So what happens when that happens? So the agent comes on. They may or may not have done the research about what they knew the customer was chatting about. They come in, they welcome the customer, and they wait. And if you're anything like me, sometimes in chats, I'll be off doing something else if it's been too long. So they wait a little bit, and then what happens is there's silence. And so the agent waits for the customer to respond, and they said another, "Are you still there?" or "Welcome," or whatever they're going to say. The next thing that happens is more silence because I've exited the chat. I didn't close the chat window. It's still open. The system thinks I'm still there. The agent thinks I'm still there, and maybe they're used to just waiting for a significant amount of time. And at some point, then the agent closes the chat. So what does this do? And this is the study that I was referencing. And this, again, is and I'll give you the reference in just a minute. But they found out that 3 to 70%, and that's where the 70% came from a minute ago, that those who abandon chats, 3 to 70% of the customers abandoned silently, which means they did not close that chat window. And that's pretty staggering when you think about it, that your people who are implementing chat, depending upon the company, and I know that's a huge range, but they did, I think it was about 150 or maybe 200 companies in this study, that the range was 3 to 70% abandoned silently. And that what they also found is that most of our systems are not tracking it accurately if they are tracking it at all. And you can see the study down here that you can go out, and it was a phenomenal study that they did, and all of the research that they did with these companies and how they quantified what was going on. So there's basically information problems that come from this, and there's also operational issues. So let's go through some of the information problems that they had. So there's missing data. And what happens is that the chat technology isn't registering the abandonment, and it assumes the customer is still there, which skews our resolution quality measures. So if the data isn't there and we don't know what happened in the chat and we didn't understand that the customer really left and that the agent then just closed the chat on their own, we're missing significant data to understand what happened in that chat. The other problem is that there's censored data. And again, the system knows the customer left, but not exactly when. And so when we try and forecast all of these things, trying to figure out how many were actual chats and how long the customer waited, and how do we predict when they're about to abandon, and how do we change our forecast to allow for that? That's some of the data problems that are happening because of this. Then there's operational problems that we have. We have wasted work. So agents, let's say that the person came onto the chat and they had put their problem in there, and before the agent came onto the chat, they did some research. And so they come onto the chat, the customer has left the chat. So that time that they spent trying to initially solve the problem, so when they came on the chat, they could get to work right away, that time was wasted. The other thing that happens is there's agent idleness. Obviously, you've got agents involved in chats when there's really no chat. And so you are messing up your whole forecasting, your scheduling, and all of the things that we try to do when we're dealing with, in a call center, with headcount. So one of the things I wanted to ask all of you is, those of you who, and we don't use chat, but if you're using chat, have any of you now started to understand this whole silent physical abandonment in your operation today? And so can you put that up, David? Is that a poll? Yes, no? You're on mute.
I know that's because
Oh,
you didn't want me to. I didn't want you to hear what I said.
oh,
Um, I'm looking at.
then don't worry about it. We can do it just by chatting here, just by talking here. Are any of
Yeah,
you now understanding that there is this kind of silent physical abandonment? If you're using chat, have you recognized that there's this propensity of really missing that a person is out there waiting and they abandoned? No?
I think we do see it. I actually did it today with one of my vendors. I started a chat and it got busy, and
Yeah, didn't
next thing
close
I
the
know,
chat?
I was off on another screen and didn't see it pop up. And so I think some of it's intentional, some of it's just accidental. People get busy and walk
Yeah,
away or don't intend to leave, but they do.
absolutely.
I think the question there is, how do you re-engage them if they still have a problem?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of times too, they come in a different channel.
Yes.
Or they try the second chat or the third chat.
And I got, just so you know, I got an email from that company within minutes saying it looks like you dropped off the chat, or weren't able to complete the chat.
Good for
Let us
them.
know if you still have a problem, so that they have an automated solution to deal with the abandonment.
Yeah, their system, that's great. Their system is actually tracking it, which is great. I think right now what's the issue is that it is basically silent for a lot of companies, is that when we are initiating or when we're dealing with chat, trying to figure out when this silent abandonment happens, and that the study says that it really does cost us a fair amount. The first thing that they recognized what was a drop in agent efficiency, about 3.2%, and that's because of all the wasted work. Whether they did the work before they came into the chat, or whether they were trying to just stay on the chat for a significant amount of time. It was interesting. Part of the study that I heard was, especially in EMS, the 911 call centers, is they have a whole protocol now because of this, so that if they come into a chat and there's no one there, they wait 4 seconds, which is not a lot of time. But they then go into a whole different protocol of EMS. They have to assume that silence in the chat could mean something different than just a drop. And so I thought it was interesting that they had to come up with a whole new protocol because of this silent physical abandonment, because they don't know if it was, again, if the person really left or if they just aren't paying attention to the chat anymore, or in their instance, is it an emergency when the person cannot give a verbal response because something's happening in their environment. So a 3.2% drop in agent efficiency. They also recognize that there's a 15% reduction in system capacity. So again, the person that's chatting is sitting there, the agent comes on and they have to wait and they have to wait and they have to try again and then they have to wait. And so you do have your agents in potentially multiple chats where the person has physically abandoned but not closed that chat window. And so again, when we forecast, how are we allowing for that reduction in system capacity? And then again, because of the wasted waiting on customers, they quantified that wasted time for about greater than about 5,000 per agent per year, just because of waiting on customers who are not there anymore. And again, what kind of protocols do we put in place? Do we train our agents how long to wait before the second, are you there? How long do they wait between those? How long do they wait after they say something like that? And so I think a lot of us right now haven't put protocols in place to help the agents understand what does that wait time look like and how do they manage it on their own. How many times do they actually say, are you there? Are you there? And so for those of you who have chat, do you have those kind of protocols in place right now on how they deal with a customer that doesn't respond in chat?
So Kay, this is really from the perspective of my former employer. When we launched chat, we've had chat for many years, but during the merger between SunTrust and BB&T to form Truist, one of the things that we were doing in the chatbot space was put in a chatbot and trying to leverage some AI technology. And what we originally used AI for was to teach the system when we were either expecting a response from a customer or a response was coming from an agent. In the event that something was supposed to be coming from a customer and it passed a certain threshold of time, which is kind of a little more than the average amount of time it takes for the agent to get back to the customer, taking care of multiple chats, the chat bot itself would take over and say, it appears that you may have left. Are you still there? And it will prompt them one more time, and then it would come back and say, if you need anything else, please, and then we'll put another button, and it re-engages the chat oftentimes with the same agent. So the idea there is to take it out of the hands of the live agent and just let the tool finish up the
That's
task.
great.
So
That's great.
there were a lot of challenges implementing that. And I don't know that 18 months after I left that it's fully functioning yet, but that was the strategy and that's what they were trying to achieve.
Great insights. Really good.
Okay, do you have any, did your data show any information on how long chat's been around? Seems like it's been around forever, but any insights?
No, I didn't. I have no idea how long chat's been around. Probably
Well,
as
let's
long as
ask.
me.
I wasn't
I
going to
don't know.
go
Does
there.
anybody know
Yeah,
how long it's
that's a
been?
question for the group.
For all of us, I'm sure it's has felt like forever.
Right. I thought Greg Salvato would have that one nailed, so sorry.
No, great question. And I think what's happening too in the digital channels is, John, like you just said, what's the AI doing? What are all the chatbots doing? And um, in one of my customers, and I think you all know that I manage, not only am I a consultant over on one part of my life, the other part of my life, I am running a call center full time as well. And usually when I come into this forum, I'm speaking as that manager and not as a consultant per se. But we're just starting down that journey of chat, and it's it's incredibly interesting to me of how many people in in the industry, it's a hospital that I'm dealing with, and how many people in their personal life have used chat and understand it, but when they go to implement it, there's so many questions that don't get asked, and that it gets launched. Everybody wants to do everything at once instead of like a really nice little pilot where you have very controlled user stories and how you're going to do it. But I think that whole industry of chat, I would love to know, and I don't know the answer to this. I would love to know what percentage of different parts of the industry actually use chat. And I know a lot of times when we talk in here, it's, go slowly or you're going to end up pulling back. So any words of wisdom as you've rolled all of this out in this whole digital channel? I know you guys have had a lot of learnings in this because I hear you all the time.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I was looking up chat as a channel, and
Yeah.
a few sources I can see that it actually began to show up on websites with live agents in the early 2000s.
Wow.
As by mid 2010s, adoption grew. By the late 2010s, chatbots and AI started their early intro. And then today, obviously, it's one of the top digital channels. It says chat's been recognized for about 20 to 25 years. A 2025 report indicates 52% of customer service teams are using some type of chat in their servicing.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, for one thing, we are dealing with at one of my clients is the use of the bots and the automation. My client has been very hesitant to not have the personal touch going on with chats and resisting that. But we're finally, I think, moving towards at least using the bots for screening to kind of get basic information, collect the data so that we know where to route it and what group to send it to. And so I think that's kind of a compromise use of bots on the chat side of things.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting one is how much do you ask using a bot before you send it to an agent?
Right.
And I know the big question, and how do you make that when you started launching this, how did you make that decision of what information you were going to ask for or how much?
It's really just the basics, 2 or 3 questions to get some of their demographic information that we need anyway, that every single chat live agent's going to have to ask. So we're trying to make our live agents more effective. By the time they get to them, they already have looked up the member. They've got data up on their screen. They're ready to go to help serve them. So, the key is just not to push it too hard and not too far to where the person gets frustrated and you're not answering their questions accurately anymore, and they bail on you.
And Kate, I think part of the answer is really some organizations are just providing general information, but if you're working for an organization that has, I would say confidential information, then you've got to authenticate a client. I think that changes the game. But if someone's just in a chatbot asking general information about products and services, it may not matter who that person is as much. But so like financial services, one of the things that we would often do is try to authenticate. And if we could get through the authentication, the decision about when to go to a live agent really varied. It depended on some things. A lot of it is just basic transactional information. What is the top, last 10 transactions? What is my balance? And those things are pretty straightforward. If we ever hit something that was highly emotional that would be handled more effectively by a live person, like fraud, we would immediately go to a live agent. And oftentimes, if there was fraud on the system, we would actually transfer or call out to that person and take over with voice because it becomes a moment of truth. So I think there's a lot of business rules that need to be built around that. Oftentimes, we throw chat out there thinking it's going to solve the world's problems. But that AI, I tell people to some extent, it's like having twins. You've got to take care of them 24/7. And there's a lot that goes into that than just throwing it out there and see what happens.
Good input. Thank you so much for that. That's great. There were some mitigation strategies, and it's going to be interesting, especially the third one I'm going to show you is But the first one is what they really found was if they allowed the consumer to input their need before it got routed, the person had more patience and they would stay on longer in the chat. So I think that's one of the things that starting chat right away, and again to the what do we ask for or what do we allow them to do before they get connected to a live agent, is to design the system so they can input that. So I thought that was a really good beginning step if somebody's just beginning to do this, the chat channel, and to make sure that the application can allow the consumer, the customer, to input what they're calling or what they're chatting about. The second thing was the mitigation strategies, and this one is tough if you can't measure it. I know in the call center that I'm running, a lot of times what we have to do is we have to kind of look at the call volume and do a run rate sometimes if the abandonment rate is skewing somehow. And so we're constantly having to adjust our staffing models to allocate different abandonments or different things that are happening in the call volume. And that's what they're saying here is because a lot of the systems now can't accurately measure, and because you have a lot of agent time spent with ghosting, if there is a lot of time with ghosting, that learning how to adjust that model so that you're closer to the reality of what the chat forecast is rather than skewing it with people that just abandon and are not there any longer. So it's a fine balance of learning how again to adjust what we're trying to measure and what is quote unquote wasted time in the chat model. The next one is interesting because this is what you were talking about. This is the AI prediction. And there are a lot of predictive models out there. And again, I really liked what you said is it takes forever to adjust these so that they're actually doing it well. To really predict the amount of time that a patient is going to have in real time and making sure that you respond to that customer appropriately within that real time. I really liked what you said too, is the chat bot coming in and continually saying, it seems like seems like you're not here anymore. Are you going to, can we help you? And I also like the fact that there was the ability of that the email went out. So I think behind the scenes, learning how to put these kind of models in place and these mitigation strategies in place, so that we can get better at understanding what this digital physical abandonment really is. And and what took me down another path. Oh, was there someone who? No? Okay. I thought I heard something. The interesting thing when I started doing all of this abandonment study, and there's so many rabbit holes you can go down when you're talking about call center abandonment issues, is that agents also exhibit abandonment, physical abandonment. And this whole study, which I couldn't include all of it in here, but it's interesting when you begin to understand that the agent acquires behaviors where they can conclude an interaction faster than is really making sure that they take care of all of the customer needs. So one of them, an obvious way, is not asking at the end of the call, is there anything else? Or picking up from the customer that there is something else going on and they just didn't pick it up, or they picked it up and they just don't want to deal with it. So they'll conclude the call. So there are different kinds of behaviors that agents can use to silently, physically abandon the interaction. And those, as you can understand, are incredibly costly. And we'll go through some of it in a second with the emotional abandonment too. Because what happened after this physical abandonment in studying this is then the next question that the studies were asking is if a customer and if an agent can silently physically abandon a interaction, can they emotionally abandon an interaction? And the answer is they absolutely can. And that's what we went into with the next part of this study is what is silent emotional abandonment? And so we're shifting now from the physical abandonment into the emotional abandonment. And so what happens here is you get a disconnect. So let's say a customer comes on and you've gotten the interaction and you've given him a solution, and then you hear from the customer, yeah, fine. And you hear that okay, I got the resolution, but my tone of voice is telling you that I'm not really satisfied. But what happens many times is the agent comes back and says, okay, thanks for calling. And so the response to the yeah, fine is, I'm just going to thank you for calling because either I didn't pick up your tone or because something happened in the call and I don't want to keep going in this call. And what happens when this happens in emotional abandonment is from our statistics, unless you've trained your ear to listen for this, our statistics say that it was concluded, they dispositioned the call, it was resolved. So it looks resolved based on what the system is telling us, but it feels abandoned when you start listening to it. So we're going to go into this a little bit. And this one was an incredible study to do on where we are currently in our call center with emotional abandonment and what we need to do in order to get better at this. Because again, the cost is incredibly high when this happens and if it consistently happens. Have any of you started looking at this or recognizing this in call centers? Are any of your call centers tracking emotional abandonment?
Okay, this would show up in QA analysis, wouldn't it?
Well, you would hope that it would. And it's basically you're having to, and this was something that happened. I was talking to some trainers yesterday going through this, and the first thing they said was, well, how do you know? And I said, well, you have to train your ears to listen to it, and you have to put it on a quality monitoring sheet in order to score it and to understand what it is. And so what I took them through was this again, is here's what it sounds like in a call or what happens in a call. So let's say a customer calls about a bill dispute. And let's say they called before, but when they call in this situation, they're not presenting as angry to begin with. The call type isn't necessarily complex for the agent. And so they're coming into the system, they're coming into the live agent side of the system. And so they basically come in and say, I got a bill and I'm not sure I understand it. It seems like there might be something wrong with it. So the agent begins the call, with a great welcome, they're warm, they're walking them through the steps of how to resolve what the bill dispute is. And so they're going through the steps, but then all of a sudden the system slows down. And so the agent is trying to work through it. And some agents are better at this than others. But this agent, when the system starts slowing down, starts to get a little concerned about what's going on. They may do some screen talk about, I'm not sure what's going on right now. Oh, let me look over here. So they're allowing a pause without a lot of explanation about what's going on. So this customer then is listening to this slowdown and to the talk that the agent is doing or not talking at all. There's no screen talk, there's no explanation about what the pause is about. So this agent or this customer could call back or could come back and be agitated and say, hey, this is the third time I've called about this. I don't understand what's taking so much time. Why can't we get this resolved? What's going on here? So they start getting agitated. What then happens in this whole system is the agent begins to pull back emotionally. And then the more the agent pulls back and displays a concern about, or an inability to really bridge that gap with the customer, they start to tune out even more. And the customer then begins to react to the agent reacting. And it is an incredible loop that starts happening where they both start pulling back emotionally. And by the end of the call, the customer may have gotten the answer, but they don't trust it because they are listening to the emotional side of the conversation and how the agent is unable to be precise about what they're doing. The thing about here is the agent becomes very transactional. It's the yes, no. It's the this is what your bill says. It is correct, and the transaction is what causes the customer to pull back and say, in their brain, they are unconsciously understanding that the emotional side of what they just got agitated about isn't being adapted to. So the agent loses the ability for empathy statements, and they're not taking care of the customer at this point. And so this is what we have to train people to listen to, what we have to use quality monitoring for. And in a minute, we'll talk about how AI helps this. But it really, emotional abandonment sounds like from the customer, the answers get shorter, their tone flattens out, they stop volunteering details that you need for the clarification, and they begin to lose the trust in the conversation. And so you'll hear your agent sometimes saying, well, can you help me understand what happened the last time you called? And the person will just say, well, I'm calling now. Let's deal with it now. So emotionally, they have stopped interacting with your agent. And what happens with the agent when they go into abandonment is the short transactional responses instead of engagement. And again, I want to emphasize the transactional because there is a whole other part of this study that talks about why do agents revert to transactional type of interactions. And it's a fascinating study of what causes them to pull back this way. And we'll go through a couple of the reasons, but understanding why they do it and how to get them out of it and how to hear it is incredibly important in our call centers these days, because I think what happens is we get really good at training our people to engage to a certain point with empathy, but when they get confronted a lot, or when it is a very complex call and they lose some of their confidence in whatever the call is, they resort back to transactional service, which then is the loop that causes the customer to react to that, and they go into emotional abandonment, and it feeds each other all the way through. The agent focuses on facts and not how the customer feels. They skip rapport steps, and there's no follow-up questions when the customer hints at something else. And you'll hear this a lot, and I don't mean a lot because this happens a lot in your centers, but if you start listening to calls and you have an ear that is tuned to what the emotional side of the customer is, you can hear from the customer that there is something else going on, and training your people to how to ask about that in a very engaging way. So I think that's where we have to get better at hearing this and what it is. And this is where I had a long talk with the trainers the other day in the call center that I'm working with. And it was interesting that when I put up this slide, they all agreed, oh, yeah, I get it. I see it. And I see some head nods with the people in this community right now. You hear it, but do we train to it? Do we really spend time on it, as much time as we need to, as every other thing that we're helping the agent do? And this is where I said there's a whole other level of research on why agents go into the transactional mode. The cost of this, and I don't know that until I started this study or this research, I don't think I truly understood all of the costs that emotional abandonment can have. Silent emotional abandonment is, number one, you have repeat contacts, and that's easy to understand because the customer leaves emotionally dissatisfied with what went on. So they're more likely to call back. They may enter your chat, and again, that's tremendous inefficiencies in your contact center. The next one is escalations. When customers sense the agent disconnections, a lot of times their frustrations will say, can I talk to somebody else? Can you give me a supervisor? or they'll just call back in again and escalate another call to a supervisor because it wasn't resolved. If this happens over and over, and again, the studies that really deal with this talks about if we don't train our agents to really know how to do this, it's almost like it spreads contagiously between agents, is that a customer will come in, they'll get to an agent who they don't trust what the reaction is because of emotional disconnection. And so they'll come into the next call being emotionally disengaged, and they will start acting emotionally disengaged with an agent who is engaged. But because the agent who is engaged senses the emotional distraction from the customer, they become disengaged. And so it's an incredible loop that happens when we as individuals, whether we're a customer or whether we're an agent, if we start feeling that the other person is disengaged, we will begin to pull back. It's just part of behavioral science. And what happens when that happens is your customers begin to think there's nobody in there that can help me. And I'm going to go and try and find someplace else if there is an option. And a lot of times they won't complain, they'll just lose trust. And this is a huge one that I hadn't even begun to think about until I started doing this study, is that there are a lot of reasons that agents disengage. And it can be that it's a complex call that they don't know how to handle. It's a challenging customer that they don't know how to handle in the moment. And through that repetition, they start to just become transactional all the time. What also can cause this is there could be things in our organization that are causing them to disconnect. And that could be a metric system, that could be a morale issue. And so if they remain disconnected long enough, they begin to ask themselves, what am I doing here? I'm not getting my needs met. I'm not feeling like I'm accomplishing anything. I feel like on my calls, I'm not connecting. And so all of that disconnection they begin to disconnect from the organization and they can leave. In this whole emotional, let's talk about this a little bit as far as what you have been sensing. I would love to hear how you are, number one, either sensing it and then how you're dealing with it, or is this something in your organization that is top of mind and that you're working with?
Who's got a perspective on this? John, David?
I think for most of our chat clients, they're just still trying to make sure the processes around chat are working well, and we've got all the auto replies and the saved replies and all that stuff tuned and working well and doing that. So that's what a lot of our focus on. I don't think we've really paid much attention to this aspect at this point.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, I think that's generally true in most of the contact centers I've worked in, as well as ones that I've done some consulting for. One of the realities is they're not really paying attention to this because they haven't got to it yet.
Mm,
So oftentimes they don't recognize the impact on, they're trying to solve for X, but they don't realize this is really related to Y and Z. So
mm.
constantly looking at X. I think, hey, you bring up a great, this is a good place to, if you don't have a solution, to at least be aware of, because a lot of the problems we're trying to solve for are unrelated to the things we're trying to improve.
And this was really something when I went down this part of the study, is I kept asking myself, who's going to think that this is important because it's soft? When you talk about the emotional detachment, do most people say, yeah, well, who cares, or really what's the effect of it in the call center? So that was a battle I had internally to say, why is it not a soft issue?
Well, I think there's a big battle that we sometimes don't pay that much attention to, and that's the reality that chat tends to sort of ebb and flow and build, and we add things to it, and it's growing, and we're trying to feed it. But what often happens is we start with chat, and what we're doing is promoting some of our better voice agents into chat.
Mm,
Instead of recognizing that reading, writing, and the cognitive skills in a reading and writing environment where you can't hear tone and can't hear voice is much more complicated, but yet we think because they were a great agent, because they know a lot of stuff,
mm,
they're going to be really effective in this world. And I think there's an aha moment when organizations start to hire differently based on the skill set that they need, because you're hiring and training and training and training infinitely, and you don't see a lot of improvement. Part of it is we need to look at different skill sets. And part of the answer you said you would touch on is really when we get to this whole AI. I
hmm
think there's enormous application there, well beyond even the abilities of what we're looking for within the humans that are doing this work.
Great.
Yeah, for what it's worth,
Yeah.
I was thinking about all these things, these slides, and setting aside the technology components of like call abandonment and all that, and you get into just the personal, like the conversation itself. And it's like, not that we didn't need more evidence of this, but put so much pressure on agents.
Mm,
It's insane. So
you're
I was
right.
thinking about this, like all these scenarios you're talking about. It's like, geez, I mean, agents aren't trained to be psychiatrists,
Mm,
and at some point it's gonna be like, you would feel like I'm not even equipped to like navigate wherever it is that you're coming from. I mean, if it was just the issue at hand, fine. But I've got to contend with whatever your mood was or whatever baggage you brought to this
hmm
call, whether it was a chat or a call, whatever.
hmm
And no wonder you get transactional because it's like it's fight or flight. I'm not going to fight with you.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to figure out the
Absolutely.
easiest path to getting this thing done without being a complete a-hole. And so fine, you're transactional. When you were talking, I searched and I said, okay, what's the average turnover in psychiatry? Because I'm thinking, well, and it's between 27 and 37%.
Kind of like a call center, huh?
Uh, and these people, and maybe it's higher in some contexts, and obviously it depends on what the industry is, what the business is, and all those things. But there's a degree of pretty reliably on certain calls during the course of the day, you're
hmm
going to come with somebody that's coming with some emotional baggage to the call that had nothing to do with you. It had nothing to do with the issue
No.
they were calling about, but man, you get it all. So anyway, I just think it's an interesting parallel there. So like it's an issue, and yeah, it's got all these impact on the business and all these things, but
hmm
I think you have to address it at the core. It's like, what's the expectation, and how do you hire for people who are really more inclined or predisposed to helping people like a psychiatrist would, because essentially, from an emotional intelligence standpoint and empathy and patience and all those things, if you don't have that,
hmm
again, it's there's a little bit of abuse there, that you're basically saying now, and you don't really get compensated, terribly well for it. So, AI to the rescue. At least AI can take a beating and keep on ticking. You know what I mean? And yeah, they always say like, well, AI can't replace humans because, it's not empathetic, it's not this, it's not creative problem solving. Well, it's all of those things. There are things that it's not for sure, but it will definitely take a beating and be very, very pleasant
Yeah.
and nice to you forever, which a human is not equipped for that. So, anyway, my
Yeah.
two
No,
cents.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that. And there's a whole another part of the industry that is talking about hiring for emotional IQ in an agent and what is EQ and understanding what that means when we hire to that. And
Yeah.
can you train to it?
Yeah. Oh, and what
You
are
know
the
that,
limits to it too? You would assume that if you go into psychiatry, you have an emotional, capacity to take a lot from people and
yeah,
absorb that, which is very, very difficult. And even in that industry where they're hiring, training for it at a very high level, and these are well-paid people, this turnover is
yeah.
still crazy high. So,
Well, you think of our agents too. I mean, they go through this and it's like, okay, if I'm going to get this beat up for this amount of pay, is this really worth me staying here?
oh yeah, can't
Type
wait to
thing.
come to
And
work
so
the next day, right? Woo!
so yeah, and then I mean, that's a lot of what I think when we're talking about AI too, just let me real quickly that for the first time, AI, we're able to use AI in our conversations to detect when this is happening. And again, training our ears so that we can hear it is really important too. The reason it's so important for us as managers is because we need to go in with different ways to mitigate it. So let me make sure I get to some of the mitigation too. So the subtle cues of AI, the AI is now able to say, ooh, here's the part in the conversation where they're both detaching, where the loop is starting to happen. And AI can go in there actually in real time and start identifying some of these things. So AI is wonderful, but we can't have AI mitigate what's happening. And it detects that loop in real time. But I think what's really significant that we have to do is we have to learn how to spot it and restore it in the moment. And so again, teaching agents the micro interventions, and I have a handbook that I'll show you how you can get it to download that has some of these micro interventions and mitigations in it, how to train these people to spot it, the agent and the manager, teaching the agent to recognize, oh, this is what's happening, and I can mitigate this in this moment. I have the skill to do that. And then training our leaders how to listen for the cues of disengagement and then how to really help the agent overcome it.
And
Le-
Okay, real quick, one of the
yeah,
things I think
sure.
AI will do that is really incredible is if you think about it in the context of a co-pilot in the chat, where
Yes,
see that it recognizes and it provides cues and scripts that can be easily used and steps for the agent. So we take a lot of the pressure off the agent and use the intelligence of AI to suggest as a friend, a co-pilot versus taking over or expecting the agent to figure it out.
perfect. And that goes into what this one, the leveraging AI and the absolutely, if you can have that co-pilot, that's critical, that can say, watch out, the agent is, the customer is experiencing this. And then obviously the training and the coaching, and I know we're starting to run a little bit out of time, so forgive me if I move. This is a great conversation. We could spend hours on how to do this, on how to really coach and build resistance in our agents. And then address systemic. This one I haven't addressed a whole lot, but boy, can your organization cause detachment, whether it's in certain metrics. You may have some coaches that are really good at not coaching very well, and they could be causing some issues and catching that. So process changes, cultural factors are critical in helping your agents not to stay emotionally detached. Well, I'm going to go by this because we're running out of time. And the main thing here, which I think, especially with the emotional detachment, is really start small. And with all of these emotional or the silent or the um, physical or emotional abandonment, is just start with one agent, one call type, one spotting tool. And I'll give you the opportunity to look at the handbook. Um, but if so, I've done a whole silent abandonment. When I went down this path, the first handbook was 150 pages, and I thought, no, that's a little big when you started looking at all of the research. So I pulled it back. This one's only like 25 pages or something, but it goes through the physical silent abandonment, the emotional silent abandonment, and it has tools in there like how do you spot it? What do you do? So it's free. You can download it from our site. Um, I wish we had more time to go. I mean, I love this conversation at the end, but I also know we're 1 minute, right?
We
Lon,
are
before
we are right up
thank you
against
so
the
much. Thank you
end.
so much for this. And it's a conversation I would love to keep going and just go deeper into this because I think there's a lot of things that we can do as a community to really help our agents feel much more confident in how they deal with customers.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And Kay, let me first thank you so much for hosting today and bringing this topic to us. There is a lot of perspective, a lot of insight, a lot of learning that we can all do on this topic. And this is a great starting point. For those of you who aren't already connected to Kay, her email is right here on the screen. And I would highly recommend um, downloading the handbook. That's going to be a useful tool. So thank you, Kay, so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody. for
Thank you.
participating today. I really appreciate all the contributions, and please join us again next month. Thank you so much.
Good job,
Bye,
Kate.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks,
That was
everybody.
excellent.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Very, very good topic.
Thanks.
Thank you.